Chapter 5, Hillary's War. In the last Democratic debate on Sunday, June the 3rd, Hillary Clinton often referred to the war in Iraq as President Bush's war. But as she makes her push for the White House, has the junior senator forgotten that this war also belongs to her? A new book called Her Way, The Hope and Ambitions of Hillary Rodham Clinton by New York Times authors Jeff Gerth and Don Van Natta highlights how this war, in fact, is Hillary's also. It's from the information in that book that we learn just how Hillary Clinton came to support and then disown this war. We'd also like to note that Hillary's spokesperson was quoted in a Washington Times article reacting to the book, saying, if past books on the Clintons were cash for trash, he added, these books are nothing more than cash for rehash. Their objections aside, tracking the senator's position on the war is almost as confusing as voting before it before voting against it. The comparison she is trying desperately to avoid. In recent months, the presidential hopeful has had no issue standing to the left and blasting the president over Iraq, but we have to remember, this is a woman who at one time was standing by the commander-in-chief. In October of 2002, with her eye on the presidency and not wanting to look weak, Senator Clinton voted for the war in Iraq and described it as, quote, the hardest decision I ever had to make. But even as Hillary tries to separate herself from that vote by saying that she was deceived by intelligence, the facts paint a different picture. In fact, neither Hillary nor her people ever read the National Intelligence Estimate. So how can she have been tricked when she didn't even look at the information given to her? But that wasn't her only opportunity to choose a different path. There was another vote that Senator Clinton could have taken a stand on, and that came on October 10, 2002, the same day Hillary made these comments.
It is a vote that puts awesome responsibility in the hands of our president, and we say to him, use these powers wisely and as a last resort. And it is a vote that says clearly to Saddam Hussein, this is your last chance. Disarm or be disarmed.
But just hours after she gave that speech, Clinton voted against an amendment by Carl Levin that required the president to engage in a two-step diplomatic process before using force against Iraq. In Her Way, the authors speak about this important moment and again show that this war is also Hillary's. They say, quote, the Levin amendment presented Hillary with the perfect change to demand that Bush actively pursue additional diplomacy before going to war. But she chose not to do so, instead joining the significant majority of 75 senators who voted against Levin's proposal. Those 75 were largely the same ones who then voted the next day in favor of the war authorization. The woman who is now saying we shouldn't be there had multiple opportunities to vote against it, but she didn't. Fast forward to November of 2003, 6 months after the president announced that major combat operations in Iraq had ended. It was 2 days after Saddam Hussein's capture that she delivered a speech where she said we needed patience and to stay the course.
I was one who supported giving President Bush the authority, if necessary, to use force against Saddam Hussein. We have no option but to stay involved and committed.
A year into the war, when most Democrats completely turned their back on the president's decision to invade Iraq, Hillary maintained her support. Soon after she took a trip to Baghdad, Hillary appeared on NBC's Meet the Press, where she said it would be a mistake to call for a withdrawal of troops or set a timetable. Hillary went on to say, quote, we don't want to send a signal to insurgents, to the terrorists, that we are going to be out of here at some, date certain. Hillary's chief strategist, Mark Penn, made a good rationale in Her Way, saying, quote, it's important for all Democrats to keep the word mistake firmly on the Republicans and on President Bush. And as the authors go on to note, Hillary, who was always hesitant to make a mistake, wasn't going to have her name attached to a mistake. However, as time passed on, she realized her name by her Democratic colleagues was being attached to mistake. As soon as she was being left out on her own, Hillary quickly changed beats. On June 14, 2006, a group of Democratic senators and their aides headed to a private room in the Capitol. And according to reports, the usual attendees were surprised to see Hillary in attendance. In that meeting, Senator Reid offered to hear her thoughts. An unidentified participant recalls that day saying, quote, it was odd to give her the stage on this. Even Hillary's own party and colleagues were shocked to see her sudden turnaround. Almost out of nowhere, she started to blame the president for misleading Congress. Senator John McCain remarked on her 180 and said, quote, "I didn't see early on, or at least for a couple of or 3 years, the allegation surfaced that President Bush had, quote, misused his authority." So now we stand in the middle of a heated presidential election, and again, Hillary refused to be out on her own. She recently voted against the Iraq spending bill that would provide more funding to the troops. Her top competition, both John Edwards and Barack Obama, were also against it. Let's, however, not be fooled by her current votes to end the war. The votes were made in the battle to win the Democratic spot for the presidency. The last thing Hillary wants is for John Edwards or Barack Obama to be the only candidates to appeal to the hysterical anti-war left. And that's why Hillary runs so hard away from herself. In 2002, she was concerned that the first woman to be a serious candidate for president would look weak by voting against a war that enjoyed widespread popular support. And now she's concerned about appearing too hawkish to the left-wing fringe. No matter how far she runs, it is the inescapable truth that this war is still Hillary's war too. And that's why this is another chapter on the Clintons that is anything but close.